folks, it's Ray with Taste Radio. Right now I'm honored to be sitting down with Buster Houston, who is the Vice President of National Merchandising at Albertsons. Buster, great to see you.
Thanks for having me.
How does one get the name Buster?
You get lucky. Grandpa and an uncle had it, so I inherited. A lot of dogs have gotten that name over the years, too. I don't know if I can take credit for it, but when I hear someone yell Buster, it's typically a dog, or I'm in trouble.
When I think of Buster, I think of Buster Only from ESPN. And then sometimes if someone has like a Boston accent, I lost mine, but someone would say Busta. You think of Busta Rhymes, the rapper, or the hip-hop artist?
I lived in the Bay Area, so there was a catcher there that was kind of popular.
Right. What was his name? Buster
Posey.
Buster Posey, right.
Buster Posey, kind of popular, but I was older than him, so I was the first Buster in the Bay Area.
Okay.
Yeah. Little known fact.
I did not know that. I think I'm glad that we're sharing that on a podcast because we don't get to do a lot of firsts on Taste Radio.
These are the things that are important.
These
for your
really
listeners.
are. Yeah. When I think of merchandising, and you are the Vice President of National Merchandising at Albertsons, I'll ask founders sometimes, it's like, what's your merchandising strategy? And it's like, we're selling here, and our distribution is this. I'm like, that's no. What's your merchandising strategy? And can you explain, to folks who might not know exactly what you do and your focus at Albertsons, what merchandising is?
Hey, that's a large question, right? If you think about merchandising holistically, you got 4 big P's, right? You got product, you got placement, you got pricing, and you got promotion, right? It's the management of all of those. My specific role within Albertsons is we own the product and the placement decisions from a national perspective. And we collaborate with our 12 divisions around pricing and promotional strategies. But they own the tactics at the division level to make sure that they're competitive within their markets. The other thing about merchandising is, the old days, it was what happened within the walls of the store. Merchandising today is so much larger, right? We have so many other ways to drive traffic to the categories and to get transactions from an omni perspective. So I got to tell you, I think I had it figured out maybe 5-6 years ago. I don't have it figured out anymore. Merchandising is a very complicated world, but what's the right way to get a shopper to a category or a segment within there? And it's fluid, right? Those are definitely fluid. Being here today and spending time with some of these younger brands and these influencers, how you manage that business is definitely much different than how you manage a big national brand that's been around for quite a while. So it's fun. Merchandising is fun and it's vast, and there's a lot of different ways to try to find that secret to get the shopper to love you for it.
Let's start with position, because position's really important. Where you're sold in store, who you're next to, and oftentimes I'll ask a founder, where does your product? Where do you want your product to live on shelf? Where do you want your product to live in the store? And they'll say, here next to this brand, and so on and so forth. But ultimately, the decision is not theirs. But how often do you take your cue from the founder?
That's a great question. I would say, again, dating myself, but up to 5, 6, 7 years ago, it was very cut and dry. Categories were very cut and dry. Consumer decision trees were very cut and dry. Take beverage, for instance. It wasn't super complicated. Carbonated soft drink, energy, water, functional, pretty much covers you. Today, it is that's arguably not the right way to do it anymore. And I think all of us have a challenge to rethink these aisles because they continue to evolve. And we call it the blurring of the lines in the beverage categories where, this item that used to be considered a water now has adaptogens, alkaline, and whatever else is put in it. You walk an energy set, a few years ago, what brands you saw, there was just a few of them and it was energy. Now you got pre-workout, you got post-workout, you've got hydration in energy. So all of these things are evolving, and now it's interesting to have the conversations with your partners and ask them where they think it should go. And literally, when they give you the feedback, I was actually interested where you thought I wanted it to go.
Right.
That's crazy. That's a crazy concept. But yeah, when it comes to category management, merchandising, there are a lot of things to think about. Where we want to be, what the visibility level is. How an own brand plays in the segment or how an own brand doesn't play in the segment. What do I want the customer to see? Do I want to try to trade them up to a multi-pack, or do I want to get them to enter at a single? And, that differs as you walk up and down these aisles. And, for someone like me that does this, it's fun to look at what we're doing, and it's fun to look at what the others are doing. And then obviously we always course correct as we go, right? We always course correct.
There's another P, and maybe you mentioned it, but it's not one of the four, but it's packaging, right? I mean, packaging has a lot to do with how your product is merchandised. It's the first thing people are going to see, be introduced to your brand in most cases. But the package has to stand out in a way that is very different from everything else that's on shelf. And that's kind of difficult, especially if you're selling in the same can, if you're selling a similar type of beverage. So in your experience, what really stands out for packaging? And again, things have changed quite a bit over the years, but what consistently has been the way to attract consumer attention from a packaging standpoint?
Great question, and I got to tell you, it's becoming tougher and tougher and tougher as the customer's spending less time at the shelf, right? I think I'm hearing 3 seconds or less is really your time to capture them. And I would say that's really the challenge that a lot of our vendors have to tackle, which is the awareness within those 3 seconds, to draw the awareness, to get the message you want to get across in those 3 seconds, and ultimately to convert. You're seeing a lot of different ways to go about it, a simplicity angle or a detailed angle. And I think as we see the packaging come across, that actually kind of tees you up for what the best way to approach it from a merchandising perspective is. Some of these brands have to tell the story of why you need to drink it. Others, they're just delicious, and I want to draw your attention, and I'm going to put something flashy on there, right? So the packaging is a big deal. But I'd also argue nowadays the communication vehicle to the shopper, whatever that is, whether it be a celebrity, whether it be the media, whether it be one of these venues out there, TikTok or X, it's really a holistic conversation above and beyond just the packaging. We do care about the packaging. You can win or lose with the packaging. But boy, it's getting complex when you look at some of these packages, and there's a paragraph written on there on why you should drink it, right? You're going to struggle to get somebody to read that whole thing and say, wow, I want to try this. So it's always been important, but I would argue, boy, packaging is such a huge deal right now to try to get them to stop and take a look.
For sure. And, someone had told me that the rule is you need to be able to identify what the product is 6 feet away, from 6 feet away, and you need to be able to understand the product within 6 seconds. Maybe it's down to 3. I mean, or at least have enough interest in picking up in 3 and be able to understand what the product is within 6, which is asking a lot of a package. It's probably easier in certain categories like coffee. I'm holding in my hand a can of Chamberlain coffee with oat milk. Pretty easy to understand. It says coffee right there, vanilla latte. Even oat milk these days is pretty broadly understood.
Cute little animal on it.
And it says Chamberlain. I mean, if you know Emma Chamberlain, you can make that, that connection. It's pretty easy. But what about more esoteric beverages?
For us, number one is how do we position ourselves best to get to that point where they're going to have that question, which is where it's located, right? You get into some of these categories now that they're almost becoming catch-all, so functional, right? Everything seems to be functional anymore, right? That was a very defined category 5 or 6 years ago. So number one is we want to make sure that we're helping that process so that where I think it's going to be, again, we have to think where a customer thinks it's going to be. It is going to be located there. And then secondly, you've got all these beautiful things around colors and fonts and starbursts and messaging that they spend a lot of money to make sure that they're getting all the consumer research. Big topic. That's a big topic. I think the other thing is, you've got multiple ways to sell. I talked about the omni angle, but you also have the display angle. And if it's something that us and a CPG think is really a game changer, you've got check stands. And there's no more impulsive purchase than somebody waiting hopefully they're not waiting in line at Albertsons store, but there's nobody more impulsive than that first person that's heading up and boom, I may have 30 seconds to take a look at this, right?
Right.
And that's a great area to get trial. If you look at some of our successes with influencers, that's how we kicked them off. We put those right up near the check stands where there's going to be a little bit of a touch point where your eyeballs are going to take a look. And then with that, you also get the added benefit of cardboard, right? Yeah, you've got the box to add a message, large print. If you need an image, you get that. So it's really fun to try to figure out the mousetrap on everything, and it differs, like I talked about earlier, by segment, by brand. What a big CPG can do with their budgets and their touch points versus a little one, that differs, right? But it's interesting that you don't have one size fits all or one playbook when it comes to a category. Each of the players, you might have a different way to win. Trial in some of these where you just don't have a large household penetration, but you're in a good, strong category that does. Let's just say maybe it's a one-horse race in one of those categories. Very important to try to get people to try these things. You can do digital demos. You can actually do old school sampling, et cetera, et cetera. But how do we try to get more trial into these categories in areas that are different or evolved a little bit from the big brand?
Well, when you're getting or asking your customers to try a new product, it helps if it's really easy for them to find, by the checkout, as an end cap. I think in some of those cases, it's almost like Albertsons is taking a bet, taking a flyer on these categories and just saying, okay, you know what, we think there's a lot of potential for these types of products. But what would motivate you? What would really drive you to, again, take a flyer on a product?
The art and the science of this business is fun. I think households and baskets is really what would excite me and gets us going on that. These big brands up and down these aisles. Every single one of us that compete with each other across the street have the exact same ones, and it becomes a price game. We know how to do that. They know how to do that. We've all been doing that for a long time. What can we do to differentiate ourselves to have folks purchase these products and tell their neighbors about them, right? They're not going to say it on the big brands. Everyone has had an Oreo in their life, things like that. These are points of difference, right? The other thing is a lot of these products have age groups attached to them, right? If you think about the ready-to-drink coffee that Emma's got, that's way different than the candy bar that Mr. Beast has got, right? We've got caffeine. Is that still a Gen Z? Yeah, probably. But it's in a different area of Gen Z, whereas some of the others might get Gen Alpha into there too. So households is a huge deal for us, and the long-term play on households, right? As our shopper base changes, we've got to change with them, and we've got to bring new ones and have them love shopping with us. We have an amazing perimeter experience. We can create that with the produce and the meat and the bakeries. We want to do that in the center of the store, and that's very difficult to do because of the consistency of big brands from the folks across the street. So that's why I want to take a flyer with these folks. Mm-hmm. That's why I want to get to work with Emma, right, and have her talk to her base, have her walk our stores and take videos within our stores, get some new eyeballs in those stores that'll still buy some of the base things they've always been buying, but to look at some of these segments. It's also interesting the categories that they're hopping in. You're seeing, alcohol has been a big one for a long time, but now seeing them come into a lot of the, I'll call it instant consumable type categories has been fun. But they've all been a different experience on how we think we can win with them.
Do you source data? Do you utilize data as much as I think you might when making those types of decisions, or is a lot of it internally developed and sourced?
So we always use data, and that's where we go to the art and science piece. We know a lot about a lot of things, but when it comes to some of these brands and your speed to market on that brand, you being one of the few folks that endorser will talk about, or that influencer, or that attribute attached to the product that doesn't have a celebrity attached to it. You got to hedge in, right? I go back to Greek yogurt way back when, right? I mean, that was one that if you got in early on, you won. You won for quite a while. Kombucha, right? Things like that I've seen. So these are different in the sense that a lot of these categories have evolved, and now it's just an attribute within a category. But how do we get people to look at us on things that we can be different in the center store and actually get your car to take a left into our parking lot because of some of these things. And again, we've got every staple under the sun, but so does everybody else. So the art and the science piece and using the data is important. After we've brought these products in is really where the data gets strong for us. So if you take one like the one in front of you that you've been enjoying, Emma's Coffee, 60 days after I brought that in, pulled some serious household data on that item, right? And obviously the numbers will be pretty staggering.
And you're talking about you're pulling the household data based on rewards programs? Or,
Yep. And
do you share that with brands, by the way? Sorry to
we do.
Yeah,
we
okay.
do. They subscribe, and they can get the exact same things that we get. And, a lot of our consumer centricity is where it's at, right? And that's a big topic. So when it's something like this, I'm very curious who's buying that. And, the data that we have and we provide to our partners tells a very, very telling story. And that one is a fantastic story for us in regards to new friends we've made. And that's very important in this business.
Yeah, for sure. Back in the day, and actually this is still true, this product, this brand, Chamberlain Coffee, because it is a natural brand, natural-centric brand, I mean, it's more of a lifestyle brand, but I mean, it could have been relegated to the quote-unquote natural section of the store. I don't know if Albertsons has like that separate sort of kiosk-y kind of section. Do you have those in your stores?
We've had a lot of iterations of that. I would tell you now we're pretty defined within the categories. Across our whole fleet, you can find those, but in general, I would say philosophically, we've embedded the brands within the section.
Yeah, because I just want to touch on those sections. I almost feel like they're so less trafficked than other parts of the store. And as a brand, if I were a brand owner, I'd be like, not my favorite place to be in, but how do you graduate out of that?
Well, stores are big. Stores have a lot of different locations. So if we want to stay on Emma's brand, Cold Air, you get a lot of eyeballs in Cold Air. Ready to drink coffee is a great growth area in those. We have front end check stands, and as the front end experience has evolved from traditional to, let's just call it a corral with self checkouts, which has provided us a little bit more incremental real estate in that one vicinity. We like to get more eyeballs. Once again, a lot of eyeballs up front. We like to get more eyeballs on some products we want them to see. Obviously, what brands have high velocities through there. Got to manage pack out, got to manage turns, get all that. But this invites us an opportunity to get these out where they need to be. Ready to drink coffee is the perfect one to talk about on your topic, because it's 4 feet buried within a sea of a lot of different aluminum and glass down that aisle, and 4 feet within 72 feet or so, that can get lost. So that's a top of mind category for us. You take a look at the CAGRs on that category, super healthy, and it's going to continue to be a huge growth engine for us and the industry. So we want people to see it, and we definitely want the unique shoppers of some of these brands to see them.
I can hear one of our listeners right now saying, this has been a great conversation with Buster, but Ray, you got to ask about slotting fees. And I'm not sure how much influence you have on slotting fees within Albertsons or not, but it is a big expense for brands, and it terrifies a lot of brands to think, okay, if I go into Albertsons, I'm going to owe the company this much money per SKU. And I don't know. I mean, is there a strategy that brands, is there a way brands should consider slotting fees? Is there a way that they should just accept the fact that this is part of the business? I guess what I'm asking is, how do you talk to brands about slotting fees and the way they work and support, what you do at Albertsons?
Yeah, the first thing I'd say about slotting fees is just there is a cost to take something on and off the shelf. I don't think anybody denies that, but there's a reality there. Secondly is, by category, things differ, right? They differ in regards to philosophies and strategies and what our competition does versus what we do, et cetera, et cetera. I would just generalize the statement that, we're always going to do the right things for our shoppers. And that's a vast statement, but, if I've got to have a brand on the shelf because I believe it's going to bring in a new shopper to us with a pretty large scale, I have to figure a way to make it work. And there's a lot of different components within how we do the business. I know that topic. We talk about the slotting topic a lot. So I don't want to... Every relationship is different in the sense that the ways that we are building them to win may not always be the same. So yeah, it's an intimidating topic, and I would just say, I'm surrounded by a group of very talented individuals that collaborate very well with our divisions and our CPGs to create wins. And hopefully when you think of Albertsons, you are going to think of a lot of these products as you walk up and down our aisles, because I'm proud to say I think we're getting a lot in there, and that makes me happy.
So if I'm hearing this right, there is some leeway. And I don't know how much you want to give away or say, but I mean, it sounds like you can work with brands on a case-by-case basis?
Yeah, what I would say is when you have a partnership, you work as partners. You figure stuff out. You find ways to create wins. Ultimately, we both have to win in a relationship, right? If one is winning and the other isn't, that's not a partnership. So, we can't. To your point, we don't want to intimidate anybody. We want everybody bringing their innovation to us. We want them working with us. We want to have a way to surprise and delight a shopper with a brand within a category that I may have before somebody else. So yeah, we're always going to collaborate and work through things. And like I said, every conversation I would say is different to an extent.
Not to butter your bread, but I feel like you're totally right that Albertsons is looking for ways to partner with and work with all different kinds of brands. I mean, you pitch slam work, just being at different events and like big teams, being very, very, very visible. If you can meet someone from your team and have a quick conversation with them, that's great. But for folks who may not be able to, say, be at an event like this or be at an Expo West, how do you create a good starting point? How do you start a conversation that can lead to another one with Albertsons?
Yeah, it's one of those things that I guess almost to your point. I mean, we were just at BevNet.
Yep.
I think we had a meeting with 72 vendors at BevNet.
That's part of our one-on-ones. Yeah.
Right. We obviously go to Expo and we bring a lot of people.
Yep.
We also have some relationships with some parties that bring us CPGs regionally that are very small that may be able to supply 3 stores in an area that's super relevant, right? Think of like Honey or things like that. Mm-hmm. So we have a balance, right? We have a national team that oversees, I'd say large scale. We call them a lot of core SKUs that we're going to carry across 2,000 plus stores or whatever the number is. But we also have 12 divisions that are super agile that can micromanage regions. And they really help with that, right? So we collaborate together when it comes to schematics. What do you need from a local perspective within these categories, within these areas? And how does that work into a core assortment so that we create that perfect dynamic of managing the local, fantastic, and then obviously bringing the size and scale in on the big brands that you got to have within there.
Buster, I have learned quite a bit about Albertsons and not just in a merchandising strategy, from a merchandising strategy standpoint. I feel like this is a conversation that I'm so excited to share with our audience. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Really appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks for having me.